Welcome to TB Dahl Audiobooks. Before the story begins, please take a quick second to subscribe and leave a comment below. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now, enjoy the listen.
Markham's people checked. The apartment was entered 2 days ago. The custodian is in the hospital. Heart attack, according to local police. No evidence of forced entry. Silence in the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a tram bell sounded, muffled by distance and glass. A heart attack, Elliot said. That's the official report. No one in the room believed it. The provenance documents from the 1920s escape route, Riley said. The ones the Tallinn custodian held. Are they gone? Unknown. But if the apartment was entered, then assume they're gone, along with whatever else connected that custodian to File 17. Riley added 2 lines to her timeline. Tallinn custodian, incapacitated. Documents presumed compromised. Paris contact, unresponsive. Status unknown. 7 of 9 custodians had confirmed the scatter protocol. 1 was in the hospital, 1 was missing. The evidence chain was being cut apart faster than they could protect it. She looked at Elliot across the table. He looked back. His face carried the particular expression she'd come to recognize over the past days. Not fear, not anger, but the steady assessment of someone calculating how much weight a structure can bear before it fails. We're being erased, she said. Not killed, erased. Every institution that might validate us is being pressured to step away. Every piece of evidence that might support us is being stolen, forged, or discredited. Every person who might help us is being isolated, frightened, or compromised. By the time we're ready to speak, there will be nothing left to speak with. Then we don't wait until we're ready. If we speak now, we're unverified voices against a coordinated state media operation. We'll be dismissed, mocked, and used as proof that the extremist narrative is real. So we don't speak on their terms. Whose terms, then? Elliot closed his notebook. Ours, not Volkov's schedule, not Sokolov's, not Markham's, not whoever's left of honest Russia. We decide what gets said, when, and to whom. With what credibility? I've been suspended. You're being framed as a suspect. Our names will be public within a day. Every forum on the internet is already debating whether we're frauds, spies, or cult pawns. You identified the forgery in Michael's letter. You mapped the telegram leak in real time. You built that timeline in 6 hours. He pointed at the screen. That's not the work of a fraud or a pawn. That's the work of someone who understands exactly what's being done to her. Understanding it doesn't stop it. No, but it means we're not blind. Volkov's entire strategy depends on us reacting, running, hiding, chasing documents, or surfacing too early. Every option he's offered us is designed to produce the outcome he wants. Then what's the option he hasn't offered? Elliot looked at the timeline on the screen, at the names, at the connections, at the one line Riley had written and underlined twice. Anna's letter. Identify V through independent evidence. We stop chasing what they've taken, Elliot said. We find what they don't know we have. Outside the apartment, Helsinki continued its evening. The trams ran. The streetlights held. The darkness deepened over the harbour. Inside, Riley saved the timeline, closed the browser tabs one by one, and opened Rask's notebook to the page about V. Their names would be public soon. Their professions were already gone. The evidence chain was fragmenting. The organization that had hidden them was tearing itself apart. Russian state media had defined them before they could define themselves, and Norwegian authorities were being maneuvered into treating them as problems rather than people. None of that had changed what was written in Rask's careful handwriting. V knew before Table convened. Proof of sequence. Someone had betrayed File 17 before Riley and Elliot were born. Someone had sold the information that led to their parents' disappearance, their separation, their hidden childhoods, and Henrik Rask's murder. That person, or the evidence of that person, was the one thread Volkov's operation had not publicly addressed, because addressing it would mean admitting the infiltration was real, would mean admitting that the Russian state had been inside honest Russia from the beginning, would mean admitting that the fabricated File 17 was real enough to justify decades of covert operation. V was the crack in Volkov's architecture. Riley picked up her pen and began writing. The notebook entry was dated 3 years before Riley and Elliot were born. Rask's handwriting filled the page in tight, economical lines, the penmanship of a man who'd spent decades fitting critical information into margins, catalogue cards, and archive slips. Riley read the entry for the 4th time, tracing each word with the tip of her pen. V. Present at Zurich consultation, March 1996. Table not yet convened on Nicolaisen matter. V referenced the researcher and the journalist by function, not name. Suggests prior knowledge. Source unclear. Cross-reference. Orlov connection to Geneva intermediary, noted same period. Orlov, Riley said. Pavel Orlov. Katerina looked up from the encrypted messages she'd been composing on the remaining secure device. The lamp beside her threw hard shadows across the apartment's kitchen table, where their dwindling collection of documents lay in careful stacks. Father Alexei dozed in the armchair near the window, his breathing shallow and even. What about him? He appears 3 times in Rask's notebook. Here, in 96, 2 years before we were born. Again in 2004, referenced alongside a failed courier route between Stockholm and Tallinn. Riley turned the page. And here, 2019, a marginal note. P.O. Access beyond opportunist brief. How? Katerina set the device down. Her face, already drawn from exhaustion and the accumulated weight of the past days, tightened further. Show me. Riley slid the notebook across the table. Katerina read the entries in silence, her lips pressed into a colorless line. She reached for her leather case and withdrew a folded sheet, one of the internal documents she'd carried from the Frogner safe flat, and laid it beside the notebook. This is the last communication summary I received from the Northern table before Henrik died. It lists which members had been notified about the custodian index breach, and when. Riley scanned the document. Names, dates, routing codes. Most were meaningless to her, but the structure was clear, a cascade of warnings sent outward from the table after the breach was confirmed. Pavel Orlov received his warning notification 4 days before the other opportunist-linked contacts, Katerina said. Her finger rested on a date. That should not have happened. The notifications were supposed to go simultaneously. Who sent his early? That's what I never understood. The routing log says it was dispatched from Henrik's authorization, but Henrik told me he sent all notifications on the same night. Katerina's voice dropped. Someone used Henrik's codes before Henrik used them. Elliot had been sitting at the kitchen counter, cleaning and repacking the emergency bag Katerina had prepared. He stopped. Orlov had access to Rask's authorization codes? Not officially, but Orlov was in Oslo 14 months ago for what he described as a private art acquisition. He visited Henrik's apartment. Henrik noted the visit in his calendar but told me it was routine. Provenance questions about a painting connected to an émigré family. Katerina pulled another sheet from the case. I checked the calendar entry against the building's entry log, which Henrik kept separately. Orlov arrived at 10 in the morning. He didn't leave until 4 in the afternoon. 6 hours for provenance questions, Riley said. Henrik was thorough, but he was not 6 hours thorough about a painting. Riley picked up her pen and drew a line between the entries. The pattern assembled itself with the cold clarity of a briefing she might have written at Ericsson and Lindgren, the kind of analysis she'd built for clients who needed to understand how an institution had been hollowed out from within. Orlov was in that apartment for 6 hours, long enough to access the filing system, observe Henrik's organizational methods, and locate or copy the custodian index. He didn't need to steal it then. He just needed to know where it was and how it was secured. And then? Then he waited. When the breach was confirmed and Henrik prepared the warnings, Orlov already knew the notification protocols because he'd seen them during the visit. He used Henrik's codes to send himself an early copy of the warning, which meant he knew the index was about to be locked down. That gave him a window. A window to sell it. Elliot said. A window to copy it and sell the copy. If he took the original, Henrik would have known immediately. But a copy. Henrik wouldn't discover the loss until someone started using the information, until custodians were targeted, until documents started disappearing. Katerina's hands lay flat on the table. The Tallinn custodian, the missing baptismal page, the Paris contact going silent. She closed her eyes. He gave them the map, not just the index, the entire architecture, safe houses, fallback channels, evidence locations, custodian identities, everything Henrik spent 40 years building. For money? Riley asked. Katerina opened her eyes. Pavel Orlov has never done anything for only one reason. He has maintained relationships with intermediaries connected to Russian state networks for at least 15 years. Some of those relationships were known to us. We tolerated them because Orlov's connections occasionally provided useful intelligence, defector routes, archive access, advance warning of diplomatic pressure. The table understood the risk. Henrik argued repeatedly that the balance was wrong, that Orlov's access should be limited. And the table overruled him. 3-2, the same margin that separated you as children. The words landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Riley felt the ripple move through her. Not shock anymore, but the accumulating weight of a pattern she couldn't stop recognizing. Every critical decision in their lives had been made by a narrow margin, by people who believed they were balancing risks they understood. And every time, the margin had been wrong. Orlov didn't just sell the index. Riley said slowly. He sold the sequence. Volkov's operation isn't improvised. It's systematic. He's hitting the evidence chain in order of priority. The baptismal record first because it's the foundational link, then the custodians who hold supporting documents, then the witnesses who can authenticate the remaining pieces. He's not searching. He's executing a list. A list Pavel gave him. A list Pavel annotated. Look at this. Riley pointed to the 2019 notebook entry. P.O. Access beyond opportunist brief. Henrik noticed. Orlov knew more than his faction should have known. He'd seen the internal architecture, not just the index, but the logic behind how the evidence was distributed. He understood which pieces were essential and which were secondary. Elliot zipped the emergency bag closed. How do we prove it? We don't need to prove it to a court. We need to prove it to what's left of honest Russia's network. If the remaining custodians understand that Orlov is the source of the breach, not just a suspected opportunist, but the operational bridge between the index and Volkov's team, they'll know that any communication route Orlov touched is compromised. Katerina reached for the secure device. I'll send... Not yet. Riley held up her hand. If Orlov has access to honest Russia's communication protocols, he may be monitoring the secure channels. Every message we send through the existing network is potentially visible to him. Then how do we warn them? We need a channel Orlov never knew about. Katerina was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at Father Alexei, still sleeping in the armchair. Alexei has maintained a separate communication line with 3 custodians. It predates the modern table structure. It uses the old Orthodox parish network, physical letters routed through church offices, coded as liturgical correspondence. Pavel would not have known about it because it was never documented in any table record. Henrik knew. I knew. No one else. Can Father Alexei activate it from here? He'll need a church office, a specific type of correspondence paper, and time. Time is what we don't have. A sound from outside cut through the room. Not loud, just the particular note of an engine dropping to idle on a street that had been quiet for hours. Elliot was already at the window. He stood to the side of the frame, his body pressed against the wall, looking down through the narrow gap between the curtain and the glass. The Helsinki street below was dimly lit, sodium lamps casting amber pools along the pavement. A dark Volkswagen sedan had stopped 40 meters east of the building entrance. Its headlights went dark. The engine stayed running. Vehicle, Elliot said. Dark sedan. Tinted rear windows. Engine running, lights off. Riley didn't move from the table. Same street as before. Same street, different position. It was parked near the corner 20 minutes ago when I checked. Now it's closer to the entrance. Father Alexei stirred in the armchair. His eyes opened with the particular alertness of a man accustomed to waking into situations that required immediate clarity. How many inside the car? Katerina asked. Can't tell. Windows are too dark. Elliot pulled back from the glass. But there's a second vehicle, a van unmarked parked facing the opposite direction at the top of the street. It wasn't there an hour ago. Riley began gathering documents. She didn't rush. Her movements were controlled, deliberate, but she also didn't hesitate. The Orlova travel papers went into the waterproof sleeve first. Then Rask's notebook. Then the photograph of 2 infants lying together under a knitted blanket, the handwritten initials on the back already memorized but still irreplaceable. Then the adoption papers, the birth records, the silver cross and pendant. How many exits does this building have? She asked. Front entrance, rear courtyard door, and a basement service access that connects to the building next door. Henrik's trust documentation mentioned shared utility infrastructure. Elliot pulled the emergency bag onto one shoulder. I checked the courtyard this morning. The rear gate opens onto a passage between buildings. It leads to the next street over. The basement? I haven't been down there. A tone sounded from somewhere inside the building. 3 ascending notes. The entry system confirming an access code. Then footsteps. Below them, moving with purpose through the ground floor stairwell. Not a single person returning home late. Multiple sets of feet, spaced with the particular rhythm of people who'd practiced entering buildings together. Father Alexei rose from the armchair. He moved without complaint, though his face had gone pale. How long? Katerina asked, already on her feet. 30 seconds to the second floor. Maybe 45 if they clear each landing. Elliot crossed to the apartment door and engaged the secondary lock, a heavy deadbolt Katerina had installed years ago. It would buy a minute, maybe 2. Katerina grabbed her leather case with one hand and reached for the stack of documents still on the table with the other. She swept them into the case, but several loose sheets scattered across the floor. Copies of custodian communications, routing logs, Rask's correspondence summaries. Leave them, Elliot said. They contain what Volkov already has. Take what he doesn't. Katerina's jaw tightened. She stuffed 3 more sheets into the case, then turned to the kitchen counter where the secure device sat. She picked it up, held down 2 buttons simultaneously, and dropped it into the sink. The screen went black. Riley tucked the waterproof sleeve into her jacket and zipped it shut. She had the Orlova papers, the notebook, the photograph, and the family documents. Everything else, the copies, the communication logs, the routing summaries, was expendable. The things that mattered were the things that couldn't be recreated. The footsteps reached the second-floor landing. A pause. Then they continued upward. Rear exit, Elliot said. Now. He led them through the apartment's narrow corridor towards the kitchen. The building was old, pre-war construction, solid walls, wooden floors that protested under weight. The kitchen had a service door that opened onto a back stairwell separate from the main entry. Elliot pulled the door open. The service stairs were dark and cold, the air thick with the mineral smell of old concrete. He went first, descending fast, one hand on the rail and the other holding the emergency bag against his body to keep it from swinging. Riley followed. Behind her, Katerina moved stiffly, her leather case clutched against her chest. Father Alexei came last, his footsteps careful but steady on the worn treads. From above, from the main stairwell on the other side of the apartment's walls, Riley heard the footsteps reach the third floor. Their floor. A heavy knock. Then a second. Harder. Then a sound she recognized from news footage and crisis briefings, but had never heard in person. The sharp crack of a lock mechanism being forced. Elliot hit the ground floor of the service stairwell and shouldered through a fire door into the rear courtyard. Cold air rushed in, Helsinki's spring night carrying the smell of wet stone and exhaust. The courtyard was small and rectangular, bordered by the backs of 4 apartment buildings. A single lamp above a recycling station cast a weak yellow circle on the ground. The rear gate was a heavy metal door set into the courtyard wall. Elliot reached it in 4 strides, found the handle, and pushed. It didn't move. Locked. A different lock from the one he'd inspected that morning. Riley looked back at the service door they'd just come through. The sound of their apartment door being breached carried down the stairwell, muffled but unmistakable. "Bolt cutters," Elliot said. He dropped the emergency bag, unzipped an outer pocket, and pulled out the compact cutters he'd taken from the Campen apartment. The courtyard lock was a padlock threaded through a hasp, newer than the gate itself, probably added by the building management company. He positioned the jaws and squeezed. The padlock fell away. Elliot pulled the gate open, revealing the narrow passage between buildings. It was barely wider than his shoulders, a utility gap filled with pipes, cable conduits, and the particular urban darkness that exists only between structures never designed for human passage. Father Alexei stumbled on the courtyard's uneven cobblestones. Katerina caught his arm. As she did, Riley heard glass breaking. Not from their apartment, but from somewhere on the service stairwell above them. A window, or a door panel. They were coming down the back route too. "Move," Elliot said. He guided Father Alexei into the passage, then Katerina. Riley went next. Elliot came last, pulling the gate shut behind them, but unable to relock it. The passage was dark. Riley moved by touch, her left hand brushing the rough brick wall, her right arm pressed against her jacket to keep the documents secure. Water dripped from pipes overhead. Somewhere ahead, a strip of streetlight marked the passage's exit onto the adjacent street. Katerina made a sound, a sharp intake of breath, quickly suppressed. Riley glanced back and saw Katerina press her hand against her right side, just below the ribs. "What happened?" "The gate. The edge caught me when Elliot pushed it open." "How bad?" "I don't know yet. Keep moving." They reached the end of the passage and emerged onto a residential street Riley didn't recognize. It was quiet. Closed shop fronts, parked bicycles, a tram line gleaming dully under the street lamps. No vehicles with running engines, no figures waiting. Elliot scanned in both directions, then pointed east. "The tram stop on Liisankatu. If we reach it before they circle the block, we can get to the central station." "Father Alexei, I can walk," the old man said. His voice was steady but thin. "I have been walking away from people like this since before your parents were born." They moved east along the pavement. Not running. Running would draw attention from any watcher positioned at a window or intersection, but walking faster than any of them would have chosen. Elliot set the pace, staying half a step ahead, reading the street the way Riley had seen him read the construction site in Björvika. Exits, obstacles, sight lines, cover. Behind them, a door banged open. The courtyard gate, or the passage exit, or both. Voices in a language Riley couldn't identify at that distance. Clipped, functional, controlled. Professional. Elliot turned them down a side street without warning. Then another. Then through a pedestrian shortcut between two residential blocks that emptied onto a busier road where a few taxis and delivery vehicles still moved. A tram appeared at the far end of the road, its interior lights casting white rectangles onto the pavement. They reached the stop as it pulled in. Elliot helped Father Alexei up the steps. Katerina followed, her hand still pressed against her side. Under the tram's fluorescent lights, Riley saw dark liquid seeping between Katerina's fingers. Not a bruise from the gate edge, a cut, deep enough to bleed through her coat. "Sit down," Riley said. Sit down." Katerina sat. Riley knelt in front of her and pulled the coat open. The cut ran along Katerina's right side, a diagonal slash about 15 centimeters long, shallow at the ends but deeper in the middle. It looked like a knife wound, not a gate injury. Riley looked at Katerina's face. One of them was already in the courtyard. Katerina said quietly, "He came through the recycling station entrance while Elliot was cutting the padlock. I didn't see the knife until he was close. I turned and he caught my side instead of my back." "You didn't say anything." "I was carrying the case. If I'd stopped, he would have taken it." Riley looked at the leather case, still clutched in Katerina's arms, then at the blood soaking through Katerina's shirt in a widening stain. Elliot appeared beside them. He'd already opened the emergency bag and extracted the first aid kit. Gauze pads, antiseptic, compression bandage. He worked with the efficient economy of someone who'd dressed wounds under worse conditions. "Pressure," he said, placing Katerina's hand over the gauze. "Hold that. Don't let go." The tram moved through Helsinki's streets. Father Alexei sat across the aisle, his hands folded in his lap, watching the night slide past the windows. A young couple at the front of the car glanced at them once, then looked away. Riley's jacket buzzed. The secure device was destroyed, but she still carried the prepaid phone Elliot had purchased in Helsinki, a separate device used only for incoming alerts from the emergency contact protocol they'd established with Tara. She pulled it out. 2 messages, both from unknown numbers. The first, "Your friend at the Munch Museum left work at 16:45 today. She was accompanied to a vehicle by 2 men she did not appear to know. She has not returned to her apartment. Her phone is active, but she has not responded to messages from her colleagues. Consider carefully what you choose to do next." Riley read it twice. Each word hit with the precision of a round placed exactly where it was meant to land. The second message was different, shorter, from a number she almost recognized, 1 digit off from the emergency relay Katerina had given the Helsinki church network. "Father Tobias Kusk, Tallinn. Found deceased this morning. Apartment entered. Archive materials removed. Police have classified as cardiac event. I am the neighbor who found him. This is not a heart attack. The papers are gone." Riley held the phone so Elliot could read both messages. His face didn't change, but his hand, still pressing gauze against Katerina's wound, went still for a fraction of a second before resuming. "Tara," Riley said. The name came out flat, stripped of everything except the fact of it. "I know. She was supposed to be safe. I told her to be careful. I told her—" "I know." Riley looked at the first message again. She was accompanied to a vehicle by 2 men she did not appear to know. Accompanied, not dragged, not taken at gunpoint. Accompanied in a way that would look normal to anyone watching from the street. 2 men flanking a woman who walked between them because she understood that resistance in public would not save her and might provoke something worse. "They're using her." Elliot nodded. "Not to get information. Tara doesn't know enough to be useful as an intelligence source. They're using her to pressure me, to make me do something visible, something traceable." "Yes." Riley put the phone down. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was controlled. Everything she'd been trained to do in crisis briefings, the professional composure, the analytical detachment, the systematic assessment of variables, was functioning exactly as designed. And underneath all of it, in the place where training couldn't reach, something was tearing. Tara had nothing to do with File 17, nothing to do with Romanov bloodlines or Russian state operations or century-old conspiracies. Tara was a communications coordinator at a museum who made good coffee and sent voice messages instead of texts and kept plants alive and remembered birthdays. Tara was the person who saw Riley as a person, not as an heir or a symbol or a political risk object. And now Tara was in a car with two men who worked for Colonel Sergei Volkov, because Riley Hunt had once been born Sofia Anna Nikolaisen. Katerina spoke from behind the gauze. "The second message. Read it to me." Riley read it aloud. Father Alexei closed his eyes. "Father Tobias," he said, "custodian of the Estonian parish records. He held copies of the church witness notes connected to the baptismal entry, original notes from 1918, transcribed through the Orthodox network into parish archives across the Baltic states. He's dead." Riley said. "Yes." "And the documents are gone?" "Yes." Katerina's composure, which had held through the safehouse flight, the knife wound, and the tram ride, fractured along a line that had nothing to do with physical pain. Her face crumpled. She turned toward the window and pressed her forehead against the cold glass. And for several seconds she made no sound at all, which was worse than if she'd cried out. When she turned back, her eyes were wet, but her voice had steadied to something rigid and thin. Father Tobias Kusk was 74 years old. He survived the Soviet period. He protected those records through 3 regime changes, 2 archival purges, and a fire in his own church. He held that material for 46 years, and I sent him a warning 3 days ago that arrived too late because Pavel Orlov had already given his name, his address, and his archive location to Volkov's network. "You couldn't have known the timing," Elliot said. "I knew Orlov. I knew what he was. I sat across a table from that man for 12 years, and I watched Henrik argue every single time that his access should be restricted, and every single time the vote went 3-2, and every single time I told Henrik that the risk was manageable." Katerina pressed the gauze harder against her wound. "Father Tobias is dead because the risk was not manageable, because I helped manage it." The tram stopped. New passengers boarded. A woman with a stroller, a teenager with headphones, the ordinary mechanics of a city at night, continuing without interest in the bleeding woman, or the stolen documents, or the dead priest in Tallinn. Riley looked at the messages again. Then at the leather case in Katerina's arms. Then at the waterproof sleeve inside her own jacket, holding the Orlova papers, Rask's notebook, the photograph, and the family documents. "What do we still have?" she asked. Elliot understood the question. He answered it the way he answered structural assessments on his construction sites, with an inventory that prioritized load-bearing elements over cosmetic ones. "The Orlova travel papers. Partial. The supporting documents for Elena Pavlovna Orlova's route from Petrograd through Vyborg to Finland. They establish the child's movement but don't identify the father." Rask's notebook. His notebook. It contains the V entry, the Orlov cross-references, and Henrik's interpretation of the table's internal decisions. It's primary evidence of honest Russia's structure and the breach timeline. The photograph of us. The photograph with SAN and MHN on the back. It proves we were together as infants. It doesn't prove the Romanov connection. Our adoption papers and birth records. Both sets. They prove our original names, our biological parents, and the fact that our identities were changed. They connect us to Anna Nikolaisen and Henrik Voss. The silver objects. Your pendant with SAN, my cross with MHN. And Katerina's case. Katerina opened the case with one hand, the other still pressed against the gauze. Inside, 3 sheets from Rask's correspondence archive, a partial communication log from the northern table, and the folded sheet showing Orloff's anomalous early notification. "That's it," Riley said. The list of what they'd lost was longer. The baptismal record, the foundational document linking Alexei Mikhailovich to Grand Duke Michael, stolen from the Helsinki Church archive before they'd arrived. Anna's sealed letter, taken from the deposit box using Henrik's compromised codes. The custodian index, sold by Orloff, and now being used to systematically dismantle the evidence chain. Father Tobias Kusk's church witness notes, gone with his life. The secure device, destroyed by Katarina. Their safe apartment, breached. The Helsinki Church archive, compromised. At least 2 custodians incapacitated or dead. And Tara, held by people who understood that Riley Hunt's weakness wasn't ideological or institutional. It was personal. "We can't follow the evidence chain anymore," Riley said. Elliot looked at her. "Volkov has the index. He has the list of custodians, the locations, the priorities. His teams are moving through the evidence faster than we can reach it. Every custodian we try to contact is either already compromised, already warned, or already dead. Every document we try to recover has either been stolen or will be stolen before we arrive. We're racing a machine that started running before we knew the race existed." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the strategy we've been following, find the evidence, assemble the proof, build the case, is no longer viable. Volkov's operation is designed to dismantle File 17 piece by piece, and he has the map. We don't. We're moving through the dark. He's moving through our architecture." Father Alexei spoke. "Then what remains?" Riley looked at the old priest, at Katarina, bleeding through the gauze, at Elliot, whose face carried the particular stillness she'd learned meant he was already calculating the next structural problem. "The evidence we still have doesn't prove the bloodline on its own, but it does prove the conspiracy. The Orlova papers prove the escape route. Henrik's notebook proves the internal betrayal. Our birth records prove the separation. The photograph proves we were together. And the Orlov connection, if we can establish it independently, proves that Russian state intelligence infiltrated honest Russia and has been systematically destroying File 17. That's not the same as proving the claim. No, it's proving the cover-up. It's proving that someone spent resources, time, and lives to make sure this claim could never be assembled. That's not what you do with a fabrication. That's what you do with something real." The tram turned onto a wider avenue. The central station's lights appeared ahead, spilling across the intersection in pale commercial white. "Volkov's strategy depends on controlling the narrative," Riley continued. "He's erasing the evidence and poisoning the story at the same time. Media articles calling us frauds, diplomatic pressure, institutional collapse inside honest Russia. But his strategy has a structural weakness. He can only claim File 17 is fabricated if it stays invisible. If we can't prove what it contains, he can deny it existed. But the moment we prove the cover-up, the infiltration, the stolen index, the murdered custodians, the coordinated media operation, the denial becomes evidence. Because an innocent government doesn't need to destroy a lie." Elliot said. "Exactly. You don't send FSB proxy teams across Europe to steal forged documents. You don't murder retired priests to suppress fabricated church records. You don't abduct a communications coordinator from an Oslo museum to pressure someone whose claim is false." Riley's voice hardened. "Every action Volkov takes to erase the proof becomes proof that something real needed erasing." "But we need someone to listen," Katarina said. "We need someone to see the pattern, not a conspiracy forum, not a monarchist network, someone with institutional credibility." Riley looked at the station lights growing closer through the tram window. She thought about Eriksson and Lindgren, who had suspended her. About the Norwegian police, who were being pressured through diplomatic channels. About PST, which had opened an assessment treating honest Russia as a foreign intelligence concern, about every institutional door that had been closed or was closing. Then she thought about something else, something Volkov's media operation had created by accident. "The story is already public," she said. "The telegram leak, the Russian articles, the forum debates. Volkov's operation made File 17 visible. He did it to discredit us, but he also did it to thousands of people who are now asking questions. Journalists, researchers, monarchist groups, conspiracy communities, Russia analysts. Most of them will dismiss the story. Some will amplify the wrong version, but some of them, the serious ones, the people who check sources and verify documents, they'll be looking for primary evidence. You want to feed evidence to journalists. I want to identify journalists who are already investigating the story independently. Volkov's media blast created interest. Some of that interest will be professional and careful. If we can find the right person, someone with credibility, institutional backing, and the skills to verify what we give them, we can bypass every compromised channel." "And what about Tara?" Elliot asked. The question stopped Riley's analysis like a wall. "Tara is leverage," she said. "Volkov's people took her because they expect me to react. They expect me to surface, to negotiate, to do something visible and traceable. If I respond directly to the message, I confirm that Tara matters to me. I give them a pressure point they can keep using. But if you don't respond, if I don't respond, they escalate. They're professionals. They know I've seen the message. My silence will be interpreted as resistance, not indifference. They'll increase the pressure. So the question is, what kind of pressure? The question is whether they need Tara alive or whether they need her as a demonstration." Riley's voice held steady, but her hands had gone cold. "If they want to use her for ongoing leverage, they'll keep her safe and send more messages. If they want to send a warning, they'll—" She stopped. Elliot waited. "They'll keep her alive," Riley said. "For now. Volkov doesn't need a body. He needs a hostage. A dead hostage has no leverage. A living hostage keeps me reactive and visible. Every hour I spend trying to find Tara is an hour I'm not assembling the proof or reaching journalists or establishing the cover-up narrative. You can't know that for certain. No, I can't. But I know Volkov's operational logic. He uses layered pressure. He doesn't spend assets unnecessarily. Tara is more useful to him alive. And if you're wrong?" Riley looked at Elliot. His blue-grey eyes held hers without flinching, and in them she saw the same calculation she was making. The terrible arithmetic of deciding what mattered most when everything mattered. "If I'm wrong, then nothing I do in the next 12 hours will change the outcome for Tara. But what I do in the next 12 hours will determine whether any of this was worth what it's already cost." The tram reached the central station. They stepped onto the platform into cold air that smelled of diesel and wet pavement. Father Alexei leaned on Katerina's arm. Or Katerina leaned on Father Alexei's. It was hard to tell which was supporting the other. Elliot checked the station concourse. Late travelers. A few taxi drivers. Security cameras in standard positions. No obvious surveillance. "We need to get Katerina to a doctor," he said, "and Father Alexei needs rest." "I know a place," Father Alexei said, "the Orthodox parish house in Turlo. Father Dmitri is not part of honest Russia, but he is a friend. He will not ask questions tonight. He will ask them tomorrow, and I will answer them. Can he provide medical help?" His wife is a nurse, retired but capable. Riley looked at Katerina. The gauze was soaked through. Katerina's face had gone grey under the station lights, but she was still standing, still holding the leather case, still conscious and alert with the particular stubbornness of a woman who had survived worse than a knife wound and a tram ride through Helsinki. "Go," Riley told her. "Take Father Alexei. We'll contact you through the church network. The old route, the one Orlov didn't know about." "You can't. We can. You're injured, and Father Alexei needs to activate the parish communication line. That's something only he can do. Elliot and I will work the Orlov connection and find a journalist. Katerina looked at her for a long moment. Then she reached into the leather case and pulled out the folded sheet, the one showing Orlov's anomalous early notification. Take this. It's the strongest documentary proof that Orlov accessed Henrik's codes before the official notification sequence. Combined with the notebook entries, it establishes the timeline of the breach. Riley took the sheet and slid it into the waterproof sleeve with the other documents. Be careful, Katerina said. Pavel Orlov is not a stupid man. He has survived inside honest Russia for decades because he understands when to sell, when to wait, and when to disappear. If he knows you've identified him, he will move to protect himself. And if Volkov learns you've traced the breach to Orlov specifically, he will act to sever the connection, which may mean severing Orlov permanently. Volkov does not leave witnesses who can connect his operations to a named FSB officer. If Orlov becomes a liability, Volkov will eliminate him. And if Orlov is eliminated before you can reach him or establish his role through independent evidence, the trail dies with him. Riley nodded. Then we move fast. Father Alexei took Katerina's arm. They walked together toward the taxi rank. An old priest and a wounded woman leaning on each other in the yellow light of a Helsinki railway station, looking like nothing more than two elderly people going home late. Riley watched them until they disappeared around the corner of the station building. Then she turned to Elliot. How much cash do we have? 1,200 euros, another 400 in Norwegian krona. Enough for new phones, a room for the night, and transport in the morning. Where are we going in the morning? Riley pulled out the prepaid phone and looked at the two messages again. Tara's abduction. Father Tobias's murder. The evidence chain breaking apart faster than she could track. She closed her eyes and let the analysis complete itself. Not the emotional analysis. That lived in a place she couldn't afford to visit right now. The operational analysis. The kind she'd built for clients at Ericsson and Lindgren when they needed to understand how a government collapse would cascade through regional markets. Volkov had the custodian index. He was using it to destroy File 17 systematically. Every hour that passed, another piece of evidence disappeared or was compromised. The traditional approach, following the evidence trail, recovering documents, assembling proof, was finished. Volkov was moving through the chain faster than they ever could. But Volkov's speed created its own vulnerability. Every custodian he targeted was a crime. Every document he stole required an operation. Every operation left traces: logistics, personnel, communications, financial transactions. The faster Volkov moved, the more traces he created. And those traces, if captured and documented by someone with the right access and the right credibility, could prove the conspiracy even if the underlying evidence was destroyed. The cover-up was becoming the proof. Riley opened her eyes. We go to Oslo, she said. Oslo? That's where Volkov expects us to go. That's where our names will be public. That's where PST is treating us as a foreign intelligence concern. Yes. And that's where Tara is. That's where our adoption records were filed. That's where Henrik Rask was murdered. And that's where at least 2 serious journalists are already investigating the telegram leak, because the story originated from a Norwegian angle and Norwegian media will pursue it first. You want to walk back into the city where everyone is looking for us. I want to walk back into the city where the evidence of the cover-up is densest. Every action Volkov's network has taken in Norway, the murder, the surveillance, the diplomatic pressure, the media operation, Tara's abduction, those are all crimes committed on Norwegian soil. They're the kind of crimes Norwegian journalists can investigate and Norwegian courts can prosecute. And if we're arrested the moment we arrive, then we'll have the documents on us. The Orlova papers, the notebook, the adoption records, the photograph, the Orlov notification sheet. If we're arrested by Norwegian police, those documents enter the legal system. They become evidence in a criminal investigation. Volkov can pressure diplomats and intelligence services. He cannot make physical evidence disappear from a Norwegian criminal file. That's a large bet. Every option left is a large bet. The difference is this one takes the game back to ground we understand. I know Oslo. I know the media landscape. I know the institutional rhythms. And so do you. Elliot was quiet for a moment. He looked at the station, at the taxis, at the departures board showing the overnight ferry schedule. There's a ferry to Stockholm at midnight, he said. From Stockholm we can drive to Oslo. The border crossing at Svinesund is the least monitored route. How long? Ferry is 16 hours. Drive from Stockholm is 6. We'd arrive in Oslo tomorrow evening. Too slow. Volkov's teams are moving now. The custodians are being hit now. Tara is being held now. Then we fly. Airports have cameras, passenger manifests, and security screening. We'd be flagged before we boarded. Not from Helsinki, from Tallinn. Elliot pulled out a worn map he'd been carrying in the emergency bag. There's a ferry to Tallinn every 2 hours. From Tallinn, there are budget carriers that fly to Oslo Torp and Sandefjord with minimal document checks on EU-adjacent routes. We'd be in Norway by early afternoon. You've already thought about this. I've thought about every exit from every city we've been in. It's what I do. Riley looked at him. Her brother. Still a word she had to consciously choose. Still a fact that hadn't fully settled into her understanding of the world. But the competence was real. The calm was real. The way he read terrain and logistics and risk was as natural to him as reading political motives was to her. Tallinn, she said. Tallinn. They walked out of the station into Helsinki's spring night. The air was cold and sharp and carried the mineral smell of the harbour. Somewhere behind them, in an apartment they would never return to, men with professional training were cataloguing what Riley and Elliot had left behind and reporting to someone who would report to someone who would report to Colonel Sergei Volkov in Moscow. And in Oslo, Tara Morgan sat in a room she hadn't chosen, with people she hadn't met, waiting for a friend who might not come. Riley pulled her jacket tighter around the documents pressed against her chest. The waterproof sleeve held the Orlova papers, Rask's notebook, the photograph of 2 infants wrapped in a knitted blanket, the adoption records bearing the names Sofia Anna Nikolaisen and Mikael Henrik Nikolaisen, the silver pendant and cross, and the single folded sheet proving that Pavel Orlov had sold the map to their destruction. It wasn't enough to prove the bloodline, it was enough to prove someone wanted the bloodline erased. She followed Elliot toward the harbour terminal.
The story continues in the next chapter, so make sure to subscribe, leave a comment with your thoughts, and share this video with fellow book lovers.